Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. I'm Aishana binti Azman.
I'm Alisha Natasha binti Rifai.
And I am Adlin Safia binti Abu Sama.
Welcome to LexNews, the only news channel for law students where we will talk about decided cases and give a review to it. So, Alisha, what is the case that we are going to talk about today?
So, we will be talking about the infamous case of Puncak Niaga Sendirian Berhad and another, Syarikat Sidu Adik-Beradik Sendirian Berhad and another, which was decided on 10 January 2014.
I see. Now, let us look into the details and material facts of the case.
The plaintiffs, Puncak Niaga Sendirian Berhad and Syabas, are companies involved in water supply operations. Puncak Niaga operates the Gombak Water Treatment Plant, Gombak WTP, which sources its water from Sungai Gombak, a gazetted water catchment area near kilometer 28 of the Kuala Lumpur-Karak Highway. Syabas purchases treated water from Puncak Niaga and distributes it to the consumers in Gombak and nearby areas. On 9 September 2005, a collision occurred at kilometer 29.2 of the highway between two tankers owned by the defendants. The first tanker was operated by an employee of the first defendant, while the second tanker was operated by an agent of the second defendant. The collision caused a spill of crude palm oil that entered the highway drainage system and polluted Sungai Gombak. The contamination forced the Gombak WTP to shut down for 4 days to facilitate clean-up operations. This disruption prevented Syabas from distributing treated water to its consumers. Then, the plaintiffs filed a negligence lawsuit against the defendants, alleging that the first defendant was solely responsible for the collision and claiming for damages for financial losses caused by the contamination.
The name of the court that heard the case was High Court of Shah Alam, and the presiding judge was Suraya Othman. The parties involved in this case are Puncak Niaga M Sendirian Berhad and Syarikat Bekalan Air Selangor or Syabas as the plaintiff, while for the defendants are Syarikat Sidu Adik-Beradik Sendirian Berhad's driver and the agent.
So we have extracted two main legal issues from the judgment. Firstly, whether the defendant could reasonably foresee that the oil spillage onto the highway due to the collision would result in the contamination or pollution of the river Sungai Gombak and the Gombak intake. And secondly, whether the first defendant is solely negligent and liable or the second defendant is equally as negligent and liable. Let us move on to the next segment, which is Lex Flix, where we will be reenacting some of the counsel arguments to give you an overview of how the judgment has been made in the court.
The accident was caused solely by the first defendant's tanker, which negligently rammed into the rear of the second defendant's vehicle. This led to the spill of crude palm oil, contaminating the Gombak water intake and disrupting operations.
We contend that the accident was not solely the fault of the first defendant. The second defendant's driver stopped suddenly, creating the hazardous situation. Additionally, road construction left only one lane open, complicating the traffic flow.
The defendants were carrying hazardous materials and owed a duty of care to road users and businesses like the plaintiffs. They could have foreseen the severe consequences of an oil spill near a water catchment area.
Puncak Niaga also failed to erect any notices or signage along the highway to inform the drivers of the water catchment area. Our client was unaware of the area's designation and cannot be expected to foresee the consequences.
The area had been gazetted as a protected water catchment zone. Ignorance of this gazetted is not a valid defense. Environmental laws impose a statutory duty on the defendants not to pollute Sungai Gombak.
Puncak Niaga failed to install preventive mechanism, despite a similar incident occurring in 2002. This oversight highlights the plaintiff's contributory negligence. Our client owes a duty of care to other road users, but not to the businesses operating near to the highway. The damages claimed by the plaintiff were not foreseeable.
Based on this case, the ratio decidenda is the first defendant is held fully liable for the contamination of Sungai Gombak as the collision caused by the first defendant's tanker resulted in the spillage of crude palm oil into the water catchment area. The court found that the first defendant had breached their statutory duty by negligently allowing the pollution, which led to the shutdown of the Gombak water treatment plant and financial losses for the plaintiffs.
The legal principle that have been extracted from this case is a party may be held liable for negligence if they owe a duty of care to another party and breach that duty through an act or omission in which resulting harm or loss that is reasonably foreseeable as a direct consequences of the breach.
As for the decision, the court held the first defendant completely liable for the contamination of Sungai Gombak, which occurred as a result of the collision involving the defendant's oil tankers. The spillage of crude palm oil caused significant pollution that led to the shutdown of the Gombak water treatment plant and subsequent financial losses for the plaintiffs. The court determined that the first defendant had breached their statutory duty by negligently allowing the contamination of a gazetted water catchment area. As for remedy, the court awarded nominal damages due to the plaintiff's inability to provide sufficient documentary evidence for special damages. The first plaintiff, Puncak Niaga, was granted RM50,000, while the second plaintiff, Syabas, was awarded RM75,000. These amounts were intended to acknowledge the losses incurred due to the first defendant's negligence. To conclude, the plaintiff's claims allowed with cause.
On to our last segment, which is Lex Us. We will be interviewing an expert in giving case analysis on legal field matters, Dr. Hannah Esmail, live from Harvard University.
Hello, Dr. Hannah. You are an expert in giving case analysis, right?
Oh, hi LexNews. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I can help.
Alright, for the first question, I would like to know how you analyze the court reasoning and decisions.
So first, I would like to talk about the defendant's liability. The court held the first defendant fully liable for the contamination of Sungai Gombak. This emphasizes the possibility of harm given that the water catchment area was gazetted and the defendant should have been aware of its protected status. The defendant's negligence was clearly linked to the contamination, making it reasonable to hold them accountable for the resulting damages. Next, on the aspect of award of the nominal damages, the court acknowledged the plaintiff losses but could not award higher compensation without proper evidence to quantify the damages. This shows how the award of nominal damages served as recognition of the defendant's breach and the plaintiff's right to recovery despite the shortcomings in terms of evidence. Thus, the court reasoning is sound as it carefully balanced the principles of justice and the requirements of evidence, while the plaintiff's inability to fully prove their losses limited the compensation. The decision still recognized the defendant's negligence and upheld the rule of law by awarding nominal damages.
Okay, for the next question, I would like to know your opinion towards judgment and justification of the case.
So, for this case, I agree with the judgment as the judge appropriately referenced relevant legal principles. It was established that the defendant owed a duty of care to the plaintiff and breached that duty. The judgment effectively considered how the defendant could reasonably foresee that their negligent act causing a collision and subsequent oil spillage would contaminate the Gombak River and the intake area. This contamination resulted in losses for the plaintiffs who depended on the river for their business operation. If we would like to see in Hockwe Nurseries Sdn Bhd and Fajar Saga Sdn Bhd, the court affirmed that the plaintiff can recover only those losses that a defendant could reasonably foresee as arising from their breach of duty. Similarly, in this case, it has been ruled that the damages suffered were not too remote and were foreseeable. The judgment also considered the defendant's knowledge of the water catchment area which had been gazetted under the law. This foresight substantiated the court's decision, confirming that the defendant's conduct was negligent and justifying claims made by the plaintiffs.
I see. For the last question, I would like to know what is the impacts of the case on future decision based on your opinion?
This is a tough one. I think This case sets an important precedent for applying the test of reasonable foreseeability in establishing duty of care and determining whether a breach has occurred. It reinforces the principle that the defendant is liable if it is reasonably foreseeable that their actions could result in harm to the plaintiff. As seen in Jaswant Singh and Central Electricity Board and another, liability hinges on whether a reasonable person could anticipate some form of the damage arising from the defendant's conduct. By allowing the plaintiff's claim, the court ensured fair compensation for their losses, upholding their rights and strengthening the application of reasonable foreseeability in future negligence cases. I think a lot of other judges will also look into this case if they encountered similar situations in the future.
Alright, thank you Dr. Hannah. The court's decision to hold the first defendant liable and award for nominal damages reflects a fair application of legal principles. It underscores the duty of care owed in cases involving statutory obligations and the importance of sufficient evidence in claims for damages. It is concluded that under causation in law, a defendant will only be liable if it is reasonably foreseeable that this conduct will result in some damage to the plaintiff, and negligence happens when a person breaches its duty of care towards the person they owed to.
So, we hope that you guys get some insight from the case review that we had done today. Now, see you on the next series of our LexNews. Bye!